Hay un momento, uno solo, en el que un hombre deja de vivir pidiendo permiso para sentirse valioso. Y ese momento no llega cuando consigue el trabajo que quería, ni cuando alguien por fin lo mira como él esperaba, ni cuando junta el dinero suficiente para sentirse alguien. Llega antes de todo eso. Llega cuando decide, por primera vez, dejar de esperar que el mundo le dé permiso para respetarse a sí mismo. Si estás escuchando esto ahora mismo, probablemente hay una parte de ti que ya lo sabe, aunque todavía no encuentre las palabras exactas para explicarlo. Sabes que algo tiene que cambiar. No en tu trabajo, no en tu relación, no en tu cuerpo. Adentro. En la forma en que te hablas a ti mismo cuando nadie más te escucha. Aquí, en Relaciones que Sanan, no vamos a hablar de trucos, ni de frases perfectas, ni de estrategias para caerle bien a alguien. Vamos a hablar de algo mucho más difícil y mucho más poderoso. ¿Cómo se construye un hombre que ya no necesita la aprobación de nadie para sentirse en paz consigo mismo? Y te lo digo desde ahorita, sin rodeos. Esto no es un video más de motivación barata que se te olvida en 2 días. Esto es una guía real, honesta, para reconstruir tu confianza desde la raíz, tu propósito desde cero y tu estabilidad emocional desde los cimientos. Piensa en cuántos hombres conoces, tal vez tú mismo, que se levantan cada día actuando fuerte por fuera, mientras por dentro cargan una inseguridad que nunca se atreven a nombrar. Hombres que revisan el teléfono esperando un mensaje que valide su día. Hombres que dicen que sí a todo con tal de no decepcionar a nadie, aunque eso signifique decepcionarse a sí mismos todos los días. Hombres que confunden estar ocupados con tener dirección, y que confunden que los necesiten con que los valoren de verdad. Si algo de esto te suena conocido, quiero que sepas algo importante antes de seguir. No hay nada roto en ti. Lo que pasa es que nadie te enseñó cómo construir esto desde adentro. A la mayoría nos enseñaron a buscar aprobación antes que enseñarnos a buscar propósito. Y aquí es donde quiero ser completamente claro contigo, porque este video no va sobre cómo gustarle a alguien, no va sobre técnicas para conquistar a nadie, y no va sobre cambiar quién eres para que otra persona te elija. Va sobre algo que sostiene todo lo demás en tu vida, tu relación contigo mismo. Porque un hombre que no se respeta a sí mismo va a andar mendigando respeto toda su vida, sin importar cuánto lo intente disfrazar. Y un hombre que sí se conoce, que sí tiene dirección, que sí sabe sostenerse emocionalmente cuando la vida se pone dura, ese hombre no necesita perseguir nada. Simplemente vive, y las cosas buenas, el respeto, las relaciones sanas, la paz, empiezan a acomodarse alrededor de él, como consecuencia natural de quién es, no como resultado de una técnica. Vamos a recorrer juntos 5 pasos concretos, reales, aplicables desde hoy mismo, que te van a ayudar a construir una confianza que no depende de circunstancias externas, un propósito que le da dirección a tus días y una estabilidad emocional que te sostenga incluso cuando las cosas no salen como esperabas. No te voy a prometer magia, te voy a dar herramientas de verdad, de esas que se sostienen aunque el día esté difícil. Si sientes que este es justo el momento de tu vida en el que necesitabas escuchar esto, cuéntamelo en los comentarios. En serio, los leo todos, porque quiero saber en qué parte de tu camino estás ahora mismo y porque este canal existe para hombres que están decididos a construir algo real, no una imagen. Prepárate, porque lo que sigue puede cambiar la forma en que te relacionas contigo mismo para el resto de tu vida. Empecemos por el primer paso, uno que casi nadie quiere ver de frente. Reconocer de dónde viene esa inseguridad que. Vamos a decir algo con toda honestidad, sin adornos. La mayoría de la inseguridad masculina no nace de que a un hombre le falte algo. Nace de que pasó años, a veces desde niño, aprendiendo que su valor dependía de rendir, de cumplir, de no fallar. Piénsalo. ¿Cuántas veces de chico escuchaste «Los hombres no lloran», «Aguántate», «Tienes que ser fuerte», sin que nadie te explicara qué hacer con todo lo que sí sentías por dentro? Aprendiste a controlar el gesto, pero nadie te enseñó a procesar la emoción. Y esa emoción no desapareció, simplemente se quedó ahí, esperando salir de alguna forma, en enojo repentino, en silencio incómodo, en esa ansiedad que aparece de la nada cuando algo no sale como esperabas. Esto es importante entenderlo bien, porque no se trata de buscar culpables ni de quedarte años analizando tu infancia. Se trata de entender el mecanismo para poder cambiarlo. Si desde chico aprendiste que tu valor se medía en resultados, las calificaciones, el deporte, cuánto aguantabas sin quejarte, entonces de adulto es lógico que sigas buscando resultados externos para sentirte bien contigo mismo. El problema es que los resultados externos son inestables por naturaleza. Un día tienes trabajo, otro día no. Un día te va bien, otro día no. Y si tu paz interior depende completamente de eso, vas a vivir subiendo y bajando como en una montaña rusa que tú mismo construiste sin darte cuenta. Aquí está el primer cambio real que tienes que hacer, y quiero que lo escuches con atención porque es la base de todo lo demás. Tu valor como persona no se negocia con resultados, se sostiene con carácter. Un hombre con carácter puede tener un mal mes en el trabajo y seguir sabiendo, en el fondo, que es capaz, que es disciplinado, que se está esforzando. Un hombre que solo mide su valor por resultados se derrumba con cada tropiezo, porque cada tropiezo lo toma como una sentencia sobre quién es, no como parte normal de cualquier camino que vale la pena recorrer. Ahora, ¿cómo se construye ese carácter en la práctica? No con frases bonitas pegadas en la pared. Se construye con algo que suena sencillo, pero que pocos hombres hacen de verdad. Cumplir las promesas que te haces a ti mismo, aunque nadie más se entere. Si dices que vas a levantarte a las 6 a hacer ejercicio, levántate a las 6, aunque no tengas ganas, aunque nadie te lo vaya a agradecer, aunque parezca insignificante. Porque cada vez que cumples una promesa contigo mismo, aunque sea pequeña, le estás mandando un mensaje muy claro a tu propio cerebro. Mi palabra vale, incluso cuando solo yo la escucho. Y ese mensaje, repetido día tras día, es lo que va construyendo una confianza que no se derrumba con el primer comentario negativo de alguien más. Piensa en tu vida diaria en México. Piensa en esas mañanas donde el tráfico está pesado, donde el trabajo exige más de lo que da, donde llegas a tu casa cansado, y aún así hay platos por lavar, hay familia que atender, hay responsabilidades que no se detienen. En medio de todo eso, la disciplina no se trata de ser perfecto, se trata de mostrarte a ti mismo, día tras día, que puedes contar contigo. Que si dijiste que ibas a hacer algo, lo haces. Que si te caíste, te levantas. No porque alguien te esté viendo, sino porque así decidiste vivir. Y aquí viene algo que quizás no esperabas escuchar. La inseguridad no se resuelve pensando más en ti mismo. Se resuelve, paradójicamente, enfocándote menos en cómo te ven los demás y más en cómo te tratas tú. La mayoría de los hombres inseguros pasan el día entero calculando qué piensan los demás de ellos, el jefe, los amigos, la familia, alguien que les interesa. Y ese cálculo constante los agota, los desgasta, los deja sin energía para lo que realmente importa. Construir una vida con la que se sientan orgullosos, sin necesitar el aplauso de nadie más. Aquí está el giro que quiero que te lleves de esta primera parte. La inseguridad no se combate buscando pruebas externas de que vales. Se combate construyendo, ladrillo por ladrillo, una relación honesta contigo mismo, donde tus acciones y tus palabras coincidan, donde tu palabra valga algo, empezando por la palabra que te das a ti mismo cada mañana. Eso no se logra en un día, pero se empieza a construir desde hoy, con la primera promesa pequeña que decidas cumplir sin que nadie te esté viendo. Y justo cuando empieces a hacer esto, algo va a pasar que probablemente no esperas. Vas a notar que las opiniones de los demás dejan de pesarte tanto como antes. Eso, apenas estamos empezando a construirlo. Ahora vamos a hablar de algo que muy pocos hombres se detienen a definir con claridad: el propósito. Y no me refiero a encontrar tu pasión de la noche a la mañana, como si fuera un rayo que cae del cielo. Me refiero a algo mucho más simple y mucho más poderoso. Tener una dirección clara en tu vida diaria, saber hacia dónde estás caminando, aunque el camino completo todavía no esté trazado. Un hombre sin dirección se vuelve reactivo. Vive respondiendo a lo que pasa, en lugar de construir lo que quiere que pase. Y esa diferencia, aunque suene pequeña, cambia por completo la forma en que uno vive cada día. Vamos a lo práctico, porque de nada sirve hablar de propósito en abstracto. El propósito real no se encuentra sentado pensando durante horas. Se encuentra actuando, probando, ajustando. Empieza por preguntarte algo honesto. ¿En qué momentos de tu semana te sientes más tú mismo?
Yet that any of it was working. But here's the truth about discipline that most people misunderstand. Discipline is not punishment. It's not some grim, joyless grind you force yourself through out of guilt. Discipline is simply deciding once, so you don't have to redecide 100 times. When you decide, one time, clearly and firmly, that you are a person who trains in the morning, you no longer have to negotiate with yourself every single day about whether today is the day you'll follow through. The negotiation is over. The decision is already behind you, sitting quietly in the past, and all that's left in front of you is execution. That single shift from daily negotiation to a decision already made is the difference between the people who genuinely transform their lives and the people who talk about transforming their lives for 20 years straight without much changing. It is rarely about raw intelligence. It's rarely about luck or connections or some head start other people had that you didn't. Far more often, it comes down to a much simpler question. Who kept their word to themselves on the days it was genuinely inconvenient to do so? Anyone can show up when they feel inspired. Inspiration is generous like that. It shows up occasionally, gives you a burst of energy, and then, true to its nature, it leaves again. The real question isn't what you do when inspiration visits. It's what you do on the gray, uneventful Tuesday when inspiration is nowhere to be found, and the only thing left standing between you and your goal is whether you kept the promise you made to yourself. I want to be clear about something important here, because discipline gets a bad reputation sometimes, and I think it's undeserved. Discipline is not about being harsh with yourself. It's not about a relentless inner voice tearing you down every time you fall short. That's not discipline. That's just self-criticism wearing discipline's clothing. There's a real and meaningful difference between self-criticism and self-respect. Self-criticism shows up after you've already failed, and it kicks you while you're down, as if pain were somehow a useful teacher on its own. Self-respect works differently. It sets a clear standard before you get there, so that when the moment of temptation or difficulty actually arrives, you're not relying on willpower alone. You're relying on a decision you already made in a calmer, clearer moment. This is why the people who seem the most disciplined often describe their lives as feeling simpler, not harder. They're not exhausting themselves every day, fighting internal battles about whether to do the work. They fought that battle once, made the decision, and now they simply follow through on something that's already settled. That's not willpower in the way most people imagine it. Gritted teeth and constant internal struggle. It's closer to what happens when you've already decided you're not the kind of person who runs red lights. You don't agonize over it every time you approach an intersection. It's just who you are now. I'd encourage you to think about one area of your life where you're currently negotiating with yourself every single day. Something you know you should be doing, but you keep relitigating the decision every morning as though it's brand new. That daily negotiation is exhausting, and it's also unnecessary. Make the decision once. Write it down if you need to. Tell someone if that helps you stay accountable. And then let the decision become part of who you are, the same way you don't debate brushing your teeth each morning. It's simply what you do because of who you've decided to be. There's another piece of this that deserves attention, and it's about the size of the standard you're holding yourself to. A lot of people set standards so large and so distant that they become impossible to act on day to day. They decide they're going to completely transform their health, their finances, their relationships, all at once, starting Monday, with total intensity. And for a while, it works. The first week is thrilling, but large, dramatic standards are notoriously fragile. They collapse under the weight of a single bad day, a single missed workout, a single moment of weakness, because the standard was never built to survive contact with an ordinary, imperfect human life. The standards that actually last tend to be smaller and steadier than people expect. Not I will completely change my life this month, but I will show up for 15 minutes today, and I will show up again tomorrow. Small standards are easier to keep, and here's the part that matters most. Every time you keep one, you're reinforcing the exact identity we talked about earlier. You're proving, in a small and repeatable way, that you follow through. Over months, those small kept promises accumulate into something that looks, from the outside, like discipline of an almost extraordinary kind. but it was never extraordinary in any single moment. It was just consistent. And consistency, given enough time, starts to look like talent to people who weren't paying attention to the process behind it. I think this is also where patience becomes non-negotiable, because discipline without patience burns out fast. You will do the work for a while and not see the results you were hoping for. That gap between the effort you're putting in and the results you can currently see is where almost everyone quits. They assume the absence of visible results means the effort isn't working, when in reality, most meaningful change happens beneath the surface for a long stretch of time before it ever becomes visible. The plant doesn't show you the root system it's building underground. It just looks like nothing is happening, right up until the moment it isn't nothing anymore. Here's where I want to challenge you directly, because I think this is where a lot of people quietly get stuck without even realizing it. Stop trying to convince the world that you're valuable. Convincing people is exhausting work, and honestly, it rarely even accomplishes what you hope it will. Because deep down, in the quiet parts of your mind where nobody else can hear, you'll always know the difference between genuine substance and performance dressed up to look like it. Instead of spending your energy on convincing, spend it on building. Build the kind of person who does what they say they'll do. Build the kind of person who shows up consistently, especially when it's difficult. Especially when it would be easy to make an excuse that nobody would even question. Build the kind of person who tells the truth, even in moments when a small lie would be far more convenient and far less risky. And here's the part that matters most. Build that person quietly, in private, in the moments where absolutely nobody is watching and nobody is clapping. Because that is precisely where real identity gets constructed. Public moments reveal identity. They don't create it. It's already been built somewhere else, long before anyone was watching. Jim Rohn talked about this idea constantly throughout his life. Work harder on yourself than you work on your job. Your job, whatever it happens to be right now, will pay you a living. That's its function, and it's a valuable one. But what you become while doing that job, the discipline you develop, the patience you cultivate, the way you learn to handle pressure without falling apart, that's going to determine almost everything else in your life. It will shape how you handle conflict. It will shape how you treat the people around you when you're tired and nobody would blame you for being short with them. And whether you notice it happening or not, it will shape the kinds of opportunities that eventually start finding you, often in ways you couldn't have predicted or engineered on your own. So what does working on yourself actually look like in practice? It's rarely dramatic. Read something that genuinely challenges you instead of something that simply confirms what you already believe. Sit with your own thoughts occasionally instead of immediately reaching for noise the moment silence shows up. Have the difficult conversation you've been quietly avoiding for weeks, maybe months. Get honest, really honest, not the polite version. About the habits that are currently running your life on autopilot, the ones you've stopped even noticing because they've become so familiar. None of that is glamorous. None of it is likely to earn you applause or recognition in the moment. Nobody is going to throw you a parade for finally having that overdue conversation, or for reading instead of scrolling, or for sitting quietly with an uncomfortable thought instead of numbing it. But all of it compounds, slowly, and then suddenly, the same way interest compounds in a savings account you rarely check. And one day, not tomorrow, probably not even next month, but eventually, you'll look up and realize you've quietly become someone you genuinely respect. Not someone you're performing for an audience. Someone you'd trust. Someone you'd want in your corner. Someone whose word actually means something, including to yourself. If any of this is resonating with you, and you feel like you're finally hearing something that actually applies to where you are right now, do me a favor and like this video. And consider sharing it with someone in your life who's been talking about becoming a better version of themselves but hasn't quite found their footing yet. Sometimes the right words landing at the right moment from the right person is exactly what someone needs to finally start. I want to add one more layer to this, because I think it's the part people misunderstand most often. There's a difference between reputation and character, and confusing the two will quietly sabotage your growth if you're not careful. Reputation is what other people believe about you, based on what they've seen or heard. Character is what's actually true about you when no version of an audience exists at all. You can manage a reputation. You can curate it, polish it, present it carefully. But you cannot manage character in the same way, because character is measured entirely in the moments nobody else is around to witness. This matters because a lot of people spend their entire lives optimizing the wrong side of that equation. They work tirelessly on how they're perceived, and almost not at all on who they actually are underneath that perception. And for a while, that strategy can even appear to work. People can be fooled, at least temporarily, by a well-managed reputation. But it's an exhausting way to live, because you're essentially performing a role instead of inhabiting an identity. And performances require constant maintenance in a way that genuine character simply doesn't. When your character and your reputation finally match, when what people see is simply what's true, something in you settles. You stop needing quite so much external validation, because you already know, with a kind of quiet certainty, exactly who you are. There's one more layer to this I want to walk through with you, because it's the part most people skip past entirely. Let's be completely honest about fear, because pretending you're not going to feel it is really just setting yourself up to quit the very moment it shows up, and it will show up. You will feel afraid. There's no version of a meaningful life where that feeling gets skipped entirely. You will feel unqualified, even in moments when, by any reasonable measure, you're exactly as prepared as anyone else in the room. You will walk into rooms, literal rooms, meetings, conversations, opportunities, wondering quietly whether you actually belong there, whether someone's going to notice you don't quite fit. I want you to hear this clearly. That feeling does not mean you're doing something wrong. Far more often, it means you're doing something that genuinely matters. Growth and comfort have never lived in the same house, and they never will. If you're feeling completely comfortable in everything you're doing, there's a decent chance you've stopped growing without even noticing. The people who appear fearless from the outside almost never actually are. What they've done, instead, is stop letting fear cast the deciding vote on their behalf. That's a subtle but enormous distinction. Fear is still allowed to show up. It's still allowed to have an opinion, to make itself known, to raise its hand in the room. What it doesn't get is a veto over your actions. You can be nervous and still walk into the room. You can be genuinely unsure of the outcome and still speak up anyway. You can feel your voice shake audibly and use it anyway, because the shake in your voice was never actually a sign that you should stop talking. That's not the absence of fear. Let's be precise about that, because I don't want to sell you a fantasy. That's authority over fear, a very different thing, and honestly, a far more achievable one. You don't need to eliminate fear from your life. You need to stop treating it as the final word. And when you fail, because you will, at some point, in some form, there's no version of this path that avoids it entirely. Don't let one hard season quietly become your entire identity. A difficult quarter doesn't make you a failure as a person. A mistake, even a costly one, doesn't make you fundamentally incapable. Often, it simply means you're finally playing at a level where real growth becomes possible, because you've moved past the point where everything felt safe and predictable. Learn whatever that failure is there to teach you. Adjust your approach based on what you learned. Keep moving forward. The goal was never to construct a life that avoids every stumble. That's not a realistic goal, and chasing it will only make you more fragile, not less. The real goal is to become someone who gets back up faster than you used to, someone whose recovery time keeps shrinking even as the challenges keep getting bigger. There's a quieter version of fear I also want to name, because it doesn't always look like fear on the surface. Sometimes it looks like perfectionism. Sometimes it looks like, I just need to do a little more research first. Sometimes it looks like waiting for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect set of circumstances before you'll allow yourself to begin. That's fear wearing a more socially acceptable costume. It feels responsible. It feels like diligence. But if you're honest with yourself, you'll often find that the research has already been sufficient for a while now. And what's actually missing isn't information. It's willingness. There's also a particular kind of composure worth talking about, because it changes how people experience you, often without them being able to explain exactly why. When you're constantly preoccupied with how you're being perceived in a given moment, you lose a portion of your attention that should be going toward the actual task or conversation in front of you. When you're obsessing over what might go wrong next. You lose your grip on what's actually happening right now, in this moment, which is the only moment you ever really have any influence over. And when you keep replaying old failures on a loop, you're spending energy on something that has already happened and cannot be changed. Energy that could otherwise be directed toward the next decision in front of you. Learning to return your attention to the present moment again and again is one of the most underrated skills in building genuine confidence. It sounds almost too simple to matter, but people notice when someone is truly present with them. Fully listening, fully engaged, not performing, not rehearsing their next line while the other person is still talking. That kind of presence creates its own quiet authority. You don't need to raise your voice or dominate a room to be taken seriously. You simply need to be fully where you are, prepared enough to trust yourself, and calm enough that your calm becomes contagious to everyone around you. So here's what I want to leave you with today. Stop waiting to feel ready, because ready is a feeling, and feelings, by their very nature, are unreliable narrators. They shift with your sleep, your mood, your last conversation, the weather outside your window. You cannot responsibly build a life on top of something that unstable. Start instead from willingness. Ask yourself not, am I fully prepared for this? But rather, am I willing to figure this out as I go? That single shift in the question you're asking changes almost everything about how you move through the world, because willingness is available to you right now, in this exact moment, regardless of how prepared you happen to feel. Raise the standard you hold for your own word. Keep the small promises. Especially, and I want to emphasize this, especially the ones nobody else would ever notice if you quietly broke them. Nobody's tracking whether you woke up when you said you would. Nobody's keeping a scorecard of whether you followed through on the private commitment you made to yourself last week. That's exactly what makes those small, invisible promises the most important ones of all. They're the truest test of your character, precisely because there's no external accountability forcing your hand. Do the work on the days when motivation doesn't show up to help you, because motivation was never a reliable partner to begin with. It comes and goes according to its own schedule, not yours. Discipline is what shows up in its place, consistently, on the days that matter most, which are usually the least exciting days of all. You don't need to be better than everyone else in the room. That comparison game is exhausting, and worse, it's endless. There will always be someone further along, someone who seems to have started earlier or moved faster. What you actually need is to be better than the version of you that existed yesterday. That's the entire game when you strip away all the noise. Not comparison. Accumulation. Small, consistent deposits into who you're becoming, made day after day, mostly when nobody's watching, mostly without applause, mostly without anyone else even knowing the deposit was made. I'm Marcus Cole, and I've spent a lot of time studying people who built lives they were genuinely proud of. And almost without exception, the pattern looks the same. It's rarely dramatic. It's rarely a single defining moment captured on camera. It's 1,000 small, quiet decisions made consistently over a long stretch of time by someone who decided their own word mattered enough to keep it, even on the days when nobody else would have known the difference. None of this requires you to change everything about your life today. It doesn't require a dramatic announcement, a new identity unveiled all at once, or a complete overhaul by tomorrow morning. It just requires one decision, made honestly, about one small promise you're willing to keep starting now. Maybe it's waking up when the alarm goes off instead of negotiating with yourself for another 10 minutes. Maybe it's finally having the conversation you've been rehearsing in your head for weeks. Maybe it's simply telling yourself the truth about something you've been avoiding, looking at too closely. Whatever it is for you, it doesn't need to be large. It just needs to be kept. And when you keep it, when you actually follow through on that one small thing, pay attention to how it feels. Not the outcome, not what changes externally, but the quiet shift internally. The small signal that says your word is starting to mean something again. That feeling is the beginning of everything we've talked about today. It's the first brick. Lay enough of them, one at a time, and eventually you'll look around and realize you've built something you didn't think you had in you. Not because you became a different person overnight, but because you kept showing up as the person you decided to be, long after it stopped feeling new or exciting on the ordinary days nobody else was watching. If they gave you something worth thinking about today, I'd genuinely love to hear which part of it landed for you. Drop it in the comments. I read every single one, and I mean that. And if you want more conversations like this one, showing up in your life on a regular basis, go ahead and subscribe, because there's more of this kind of thinking coming, and I'd like you to be here for it. Act like you belong in the room. Then go do the quiet, unglamorous work that actually earns you the right to stay there.